So with sewage spills and Thames Water leaking a shocking 630 million litres of water every day from its ageing pipework network, many campaigners have argued that the water companies have mismanaged and abused the natural resource for vast profit. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we renationalise the water industry? Well, joining me now is the leader of Social Democrat Party, William Clouston, political commentator Benedict Spence, former Labour MP Stephen Pound, and also editorial and research fellow at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Len Shackleton. OK, so I'm going to start with you, William. What do you think? Is it time to start looking at nationalisation of this? This is a resource that we need. It's a vital necessity.
Oh, certainly, yeah. Privatisation of water, just like privatisation of the railways and then electricity supply, is a failed experiment. What we've ended up with is a series of companies absolutely laden with debt. Ofwat has watched this happen. These companies have been used as debt mules. You have the secondary problem of vastly overpaid executives getting £3 or £4 million a year. The person that runs Scottish Water doesn't get that. That's a nationalised industry. You've got a problem of dividends being siphoned off abroad, which harms our balance of payments. And above all, you've got these companies that have lost their focus. Their focus, because it's privatised, is dividends and not investment. And I think the whole thing has been a disaster. And these companies are in no position to implement the 50 or 60 billion pounds worth of investment that is required to stop shoving sewage into our waterways. So the whole thing is a shambles. And I would just remind anyone arguing against public ownership that public ownership of water is the natural situation around the whole world. This was an experiment that we tried and it's failed.
Well, a lot of people would agree with that. Stephen Pound, an experiment that's been tried out and failed.
Right, I think. Good afternoon, Anna.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, so obviously the first thing, we make Fergal Sharkey in charge of the whole operation. But look, there's a couple of things here that absolutely stink, even worse than the sewage that's being dumped in our local rivers. Firstly, 27 senior Ofwat executives now work for the water companies. It's the ultimate revolving door, and that is disgraceful. The second thing is that if we renationalise them tomorrow, we'd still be stuck with a huge amount of debt. And I think what Liv Garfield up at Severn Trent is doing is talking about they're having an emergency meeting, a secret, well, not so secret meeting of all the water company bosses to realise that now the game could well be up. And they're talking about repurposing themselves as sort of socially responsible companies. So in the short term, we can't renationalise it because the debt would just be horrendous. In the medium to long term, probably going to happen anyway, even if if it's not through legislation. But in the first case, what we've got to do is to regulate them all the way to honesty and probity. At the moment, the regulatory system is weak and it simply isn't working. We're going to regulate them. And I must admit, I'm with the great Nick Ferrari, who may not be your favourite broadcaster representing somebody else, but he said we should actually impose penal sanctions on them if they don't actually solve the problem.
So Stephen, you think they should be nationalised? Yes or no? Yes?
100%.
Yeah, 100%. OK, let's go to Benedict Spence.
I'm afraid you're not going to get much disagreement from me, simply because I understand the principle behind privatisation, and often it can work in some circumstances, but in this instance it hasn't. Now, partly that's because of circumstance. You know, we're dealing with outdated systems. You know, we don't have enough reservoirs. We don't build enough reservoirs. That's a separate conversation as to why we don't do that. But you know, in a lot of cities, things like pipe networks, they're very sort of out of date, and really a lot of the money that should be going and is being siphoned off in dividends should be going towards this sort of thing, but it's not. And I don't think you can therefore make a very good argument that privatization is making things more efficient when you do see the companies in that amount of debt, money being going to shareholders rather than going to service debt or indeed to improve the situation. And the problem is, if you're talking about water, it is a fundamental building block of existence. I know that this sort of sounds a little bit simplistic, but it's true. And the state, in my opinion, should be there for very few things, but probably the preservation and the supply of water, given that everybody needs that or they die in 3 days, and the livestock dies and everything else sort of collapses. It's sort of a fundamental thing that I think actually, if you were going to sort of line up the, say, 5 things that you'd want the state to do, I think running water, clean water, that would probably be pretty high up on the list of things it should provide.
Right, Len Shackleton.
Well, there's no doubt that the water industry is in a complete mess at the moment, but I think a large part of this is down to the regulator, Ofwat, who I think is many of the priorities which Ofwat has been pushing have led to these kind of problems. Keeping prices down, for example, which has been the main drive of Ofwat for a very long time, has the effect of encouraging borrowing, which, as you've pointed out, borrowing is overstretched. 14 billion borrowing by Thames Water on an income revenue of about 2.2 billion is a bit bonkers. So there's a lot wrong with this. On the other hand, nationalisation, for a start, as Stephen suggested, it would take a while and it would be expensive. It's not all that, if you look at Scotland and Northern Ireland, which are, of course, still run by the state, we find that they're doing worse on leakages and they're doing worse on sewage spills. And we're actually, the record of England and Wales water over the last 20 years has been one of more or less continual improvement, not as fast as we want to see it. And I think this is down to the regulator. I don't think we should go down the direction of trying to nationalise it again.
So what about all the money that the shareholders have been taking out of it, and they promised a certain level of investment over a period of time, but then they took all the money out at the beginning? What about that, though?
Well, I don't think that's actually
that wouldn't
true.
happen in a private company.
There was a considerable injection of investment in the early stages of privatisation, and there is much more planned. There are things going ahead at the moment. I mean, nobody has talked, for example, while talking around Thames Water, they haven't really been talking about the Thames Tideway Tunnel, which is going to make a major difference to the Thames estuary. This is 20-kilometre long tunnel from Acton down to Stratford and Beckton, which it's a 24-foot diameter tunnel here, which is going to get rid of a lot of these problems of sewage overspill into the River Thames. So that is going ahead. That's cost £4 or £5 billion pounds.
That may be one thing, but
we shouldn't downplay this.
Well, true, but they shouldn't be dumping the water in the first place. But I hear you. Thank you so much for all.
It's very difficult not to do, Nana, because if you don't
they just need to not do it.
It comes back into the house. If that's what you want, welcome.
But they shouldn't be dumping the sewage, though. I mean, there are rules to that. They should be treating it before it goes out in that way, and they need to fix all the old pipes as well, all the leaking water. They lose billions and billions of litres of water every day.
Yeah, so our record on leaking water is a lot better than you think. It's a lot better than most European countries. If you look at
how do you know what I think? You don't know what I think, but yeah, I hear you. All right, thank you so much to William Clouston, Social Democratic Party, Benedict Spence, political commentator, Stephen Pound, former Labour MP, and also Len Shackleton. Thank you so much for your thoughts.